Hi, I'm James from Chaosium. I sat down with Jeff Richard, who is the creative director of Chaosium, and we talked about the various homelands available in RuneQuest. If you're just starting out with RuneQuest, there's a lot of different places that your character can be from, and I asked Jeff to talk about them and to also explain why what homeland you're from is so important. I'll jump across to the interview in a moment, but first, please subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.
One's culture and community really helps define your character, and I don't think that's even so much in just in RuneQuest, although I think it's RuneQuest very much pulls that forward. Pendragon, similarly, it matters tremendously what your character's connection are. But even in Call of Cthulhu, you know, when you say that my character is from Arkham, Massachusetts, you are clearly saying something about that character, as opposed to saying, hey, I'm from Leadville or I'm from Saratoga Springs. You know, the point is that in role-playing games, where your character comes from and what their community is should matter, unless you're some sort of completely rootless wanderer. And that works for some games, but most of our games try to tie the character into the setting.
But in RuneQuest and Pendragon as well, it's not just an aesthetic choice. These have real and pretty wide mechanical
implications. Absolutely. So your RuneQuest character is probably going to have a tie to their kinship group, because it's a Bronze Age world, so kinship matters tremendously. What is my clan? What is my tribe? Who are my family members? I mean, how can I have a feud if I don't have a family to back me up in that feud? But also you have your cult, your temple. That's a localized thing. This is not the world of world-spanning monotheistic faiths. This is a world of local gods. God lives on that hill over there. We go and visit him or her, and again, that makes a huge difference with what your homeland is. And additionally, the homeland cultures vary tremendously. You have some that are very urbanized, that might have great metalworking and great techniques, and then you've got others where it is livestock herding nomads riding on big bison and llamas. So you have this huge difference in these cultures, and obviously it's going to make a difference which one you pick.
So for somebody who might just be coming into RuneQuest and who wants a bit of background but hasn't read anything about Glorantha yet, what are the main homelands that are available to choose from in the core setting, so around Dragon Pass?
So the core setting of RuneQuest are those lands around an area called Dragon Pass. And Dragon Pass is important because that's the crossroads of the continent. It's a highland area, but it happens to be the lowest point between two big mountain ranges that divide two of the richest areas of the settlement. So all of the big wars and all of the trade routes through the center of the continent all go right over Dragon Pass. And so when we're talking about that, the core areas, it's Dragon Pass and the areas immediately adjacent to that. And so that is the kingdom or principality of Sartar. That's the kingdom of Tarsh, which is a client kingdom of the Lunar Empire. It's the Grazelanders. It's the queendom of Esrolia with its great, amazing cities and seaborne trade. And it's the nomads of Prax. And those are the core homelands. Now Tarsh is broken up into two. There's Lunar Tarsh, and then there's Old Tarsh, which is a tiny rump of the formerly powerful kingdom. And it's the place where, high up in the mountains, you've got those people that refuse to bow down before the Red Emperor, eke out a miserable existence high up in the snow. and dream about when they dominated all of Dragon Pass.
Well, let's dive into each of these individually. Can you tell us about the Kingdom of Sartar? Because that's sort of the default assumed starting point.
Yeah, Sartar is the default background for characters in RuneQuest, and it has been for a long time. Sartar is the linchpin of the story for what is going on in the RuneQuest campaign. And one way of thinking about Sartar is it's kind of like right now it's kind of like Macedon. And Macedon is the Greek kingdom of Philip and Alexander the Great. You know, it's this kingdom that is made up of a bunch of tribes that are united by trade and by a number of cities that were built in it, and ruled by a semi-magical or semi-divine ruling house, the House of Sartar, that has been occupied for the last generation by the Lunar Empire. And again, if we want to go to a real world comparison, Macedon was for a long time occupied or a tributary of the Persian Empire, but now it's been liberated again, and it is going to start the hero wars. It's going to fight against its former oppressor. It's going to try to unify all of Dragon Pass, and it's a very dynamic culture. It gives a huge range of possible character types, a lot of different cults. But the easiest, if I'm trying to tell players, oh, you know, what are these guys like? You know, kind of think, if you've ever seen the old movie from the early 2000s, Alexander, or any of the big Bollywood historical specials, it's like that. It's civilized, but it is still basically, it's a civilized tribal society. So you've got these tribes and clans, and they're all very, very proud and have a strong identity. But they've also got cities and scribes, and they, left to their own devices, they would generally tear each other apart in feuds and conflicts. But they're held together by this House of Sartar, which has largely been extinguished by the Lunar Empire, but there's still a handful of heirs left.
You mentioned the Lunar Empire, so let's talk about Tarsh now, Lunar Tarsh specifically. Tell us about Tarsh as a homeland.
Okay, so Tarsh that's the outpost of the Lunar Empire. It's the farthest that the Lunar Empire has really been able to establish itself. And you know, not surprisingly, the capital city of Tarsh is called Furthest, which just represents the furthest point that some say it's the furthest point you can travel up the Great Osler River without having to portage. Others say that is the furthest of the lunar cities, and whichever, you know, you can take whichever answer you want to have from it. But Tarsh is mostly lunar. It's the core of it is a colony and settlement from the lunar heartlands. So again, if we want to go back to our real world comparison, this is like a Roman colony, or one of the colonies that Alexander founded in places like Bactria or in Iran or Egypt. It's a grand, glorious example of lunar city or lunar civilization surrounded by barbarians. And entertainingly, one of Alexander's cities, Alexandria Eshiat, literally means Alexandria the furthest, which, you know, again, makes a good touchstone on this. And so now the lunars are fun, and playing a lunar Tarshite is cool, because one, you look at everybody else around you and you consider them barbarians. You're a representative of the greatest, mightiest civilization on Glorantha, the Lunar Empire. They worship the seven mothers and the red goddess, which are self-made gods from within human history. They made themselves divine only 400 years ago. And the red goddess was so awesome, she actually when she decided to finally become a goddess and have her apotheosis, she rose into the air and lifted with her a vast orb of earth, some 40 or so kilometers in diameter. I can't remember how wide the red moon is, and brought it up into the sky where it is now the moon. I mean, awesome stuff. And they've got cool magic that operates differently from everybody else's. It's on a lunar cycle. So when the moon is full, your magic is really strong. And when the moon is dark, your magic is barely there. And of course, this is Glorantha. So it's a 7-day cycle instead of a 28-day, like in the real world. And everybody hates you. And they hate you for a couple of reasons. One, you're the empire. You know, nobody likes the big empire. You've been entirely too successful. You've conquered everybody at one time or another. And the other reason that lots of people really hate you is you're willing to work with chaos, the world devourer and world destroyer, to advance your causes. You know, you're not stupid enough to go full chaos in most cases, but you're willing to play footsie with them, kind of like modern countries do with nuclear weapons. You know, it's just a good thing to have around.
I want to dive into some of the other homelands now, but to avoid this video going on for a very, very long time, I'm going to lump a couple of them together.
Sure.
So broadly speaking, Prax and the Grazelands, they are both nomad areas. Am I right?
Sort of, kind of. Prax is truly nomads. The Praxians they herd bison and high llamas. High llamas are like they're basically the North American megafauna, Alta Camelus. They have sable antelope and impalas, and each one of these beasts are sacred to one of the great tribes. They've even got rhinos and two-legged lizards. But they are true nomads in that they migrate around the plains of Prax and the wastelands seeking fresh grasslands. The Grazelanders are I believe actually the term is semi-nomadic. So they have a ruling class that herds horses and only horses. They don't touch cattle. They don't touch pigs. They don't touch anything except horses. And they revere their horses. They view the horses as children of the sun, and they travel around the small area, moving from pasture to pasture with their horses. But about half of the Grazelanders aren't horse herders. They're farmers or live in the trade towns, and they provide a lot of the food necessary to support the upper class. They provide the trade goods, the metallurgy, etc. And of course, they've got no problem with cows or pigs or anything else because they're a lower caste. So one way of looking at the Grazelanders is that they're moving from being nomads to being a settled nobility or aristocracy. So kind of imagine what happened in Central Asia or in northern India. You know, the original Indo-European speaking herders that came into North India, or the followers of the Turks and the Mongols that eventually settled down, and their aristocracy, you know, continued to have a big horse-oriented culture, but most of the folk became farmers.
And last but not least, we have Esrolia, which sometimes I get a little confused about myself. So please.
So Esrolia is a very, very agriculturally productive land. It has more people in it than all the rest of the homelands put together and then some. It is the home of the great earth goddess Ernalda. She is, generally everybody agrees that she lives in Esrolia, and that's her land. And as a result, Esrolia is ruled by queens, by matriarchs. Now, it's a matriarchy, not a gynocracy. So a matriarchy is where the rulers are women. But most of the people in Esrolia are farmers. They're farmers or the city folk, and they've got the Lightbringers gods. They've got Humacht and Isseries and Lankormai and Orlanth and all of that. But their most important deity is the Earth Goddess and her children, who is the reason that Esrolia is so phenomenally wealthy and can maintain such a huge number of people. And then the other thing Esrolia has is it's got the great city of Nochit, which is one of the biggest and richest cities in the world. That is also where the maritime, it's basically the maritime center of Glorantha. And so that's where you have traders and ships that go all over the world to far off continents and lands carrying silk and spices and herbs, and you name it, you can get it in Nochit. It's like New York City meets Venice.
This is a fantastic suite of all of the homelands, and there's so much to dive into. If I've just heard this and I'm so excited about everything, how do I find which one's right for me? Which one do I pick?
Picking the homeland, my recommendation is first talk with the game master. Where does she want to set the game? Is this going to be a game that takes place in the city of Nochit? Okay, well, maybe I want to play an Esrolian or a Sartarite because they've got the easiest connections. Maybe if the game is going to be set in Nochit, maybe being a bison rider who wants to herd livestock might not be the most perfect fit with what the GM wants to do. But let's assume all things are equal. Then it kind of comes down to what sort of character do I want to have? Now, Sartar and Tarsh and Esrolia all have cities. They all have scribes, etc., but they're all very different. So Esrolia, it's centered around the goddess, and it's very civilized. It's civilized to the point of decadence and just such great lushness. And so if I want to play a character that maybe is a thief or a duelist or something like that, Esrolia would be awesome. Whereas Sartar is much more, that's your heroic kingdom. That's where I want to play a character that, if I'm going to tie it to a real world setting, where a character who might be willing to follow Alexander to conquer Persia, or, a proud, heroic figure in a setting or in a land where that sort of martial heroism is idealized. Or if I want to play an agent of the empire, somebody that is in this big, powerful, aggressive, imperialist empire. Imperialist empire seems a bit redundant, but that's okay. I want to, sometimes that's fun. I want to play the Roman soldier. I want to play the person from the center of the world, proud of their great empire. That's very different styles. And also you have different cults in each of these. In Esrolia, you have the Earth Mother, Ernalda. In Sartar, you have Orlanth. In Tarsh, you have the Red Goddess and the Seven Mothers. Maybe I don't want to play, that was someone from one of these great kingdoms. Maybe I want to play a character that, I'm a Grazelander. I'm one of the pony breeders of the Grazelands. I worship the sun, and I'm just kind of along for the ride in this, along for the ride quite appropriately in the game. And it's okay that nobody knows my customs because I'm a Grazelander, and that's cool. And, sometimes that's what I want to play. Or maybe sometimes I want to play, the tough nomad, and again, thinking real world, it's like a Scythian or a Hun or a Mongol or, whatever nomadic culture you want to have there. There's a fun to doing that. And the great thing in Glorantha is that in Dragon Pass, you have all of these different types of cultures all of which a GM should be able to tie together.